Thank you, Mr. President. I rise this afternoon to explain why the Senate should vote on my amendment to the funding bill and why the Democrat leader is wrong to hold up this process. This is a process that should already be concluded by now. It's simply because he wants to avoid voting on my amendment. My amendment's simple. It would require that the census determine basic population statistics like the number of citizens, non-citizens, and illegal aliens that live in this country, you know, what the census is supposed to do. And it would require that only U.S. citizens be counted in determining the number of House seats and electoral votes that go to each state. That's pretty simple. That's pretty straightforward. That's how most Americans think things should work here in America. Unfortunately, illegal aliens are currently counted for the purposes of determining how many congressional seats and how many electoral votes a given state may obtain. The more illegal aliens, the more non-citizens in your state or your district, the greater your voting power in Congress and the greater your voting power in presidential elections. This means that in a state like California, millions of illegal aliens result in California getting several more congressional seats, several more electoral college votes. This not only destroys the principle of one person, one vote by making some Americans' votes more powerful than others, but it encourages illegal immigration and sanctuary cities as a way to increase political power. Think about that. Over the past 3 years, Americans have seen the devastating consequences of this perverse incentive to bring illegal migrants into this country, to leverage them to build more congressional districts and more electoral votes on the backs of these illegal migrants. Joe Biden has allowed nearly 10 million migrants to come into our country illegally just since he took office 3 years ago. That's significantly more than the entire population of my state. That's more than 13 congressional seats and electoral votes that are wrongly distributed. Several weeks ago, video emerged of a Democrat House member from New York calling for more illegal immigration to her district for redistricting purposes. Yes, you heard that. What she means is that Americans are fleeing blue cities and states en masse because of bad government. But congressional seats are allocated based on population. So if you're losing population, you either have to backfill it or lose congressional seats. Thank you. This representative stated that because of population loss, she needs to fill her district with illegal aliens. She has to do that just to keep from losing her congressional seat. She's inviting these illegal aliens to come into her district in New York. Just to do that, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, if you want to know who it is. Mr. President, the representative who made these comments represents New York's 9th congressional district. That's the same district in which the James Madison High School resides. That's the same district. James Madison High School recently had to clear out its rooms, recently had to clear out the school for illegal immigrant housing. The children were told to go home, to study by Zoom. Their school was now being confiscated to place illegal aliens in their school. Interestingly, that's also the very same district that the Democrat leader formerly represented when he served in the House of Representatives. Even more interesting than that, James Madison High School is the very high school that our Democrat leader attended. The weight of every American's votes should be equal. More illegal alien resettlement shouldn't mean more political power. My amendment would ensure just that. Currently, a sanctuary city with hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens not only gets more electoral votes and congressional seats because these illegal aliens are counted, but the weight of residents' votes are stronger because their voting power includes the population of non-citizens, despite the fact that these non-citizens can't vote. These illegal aliens provide leverage to citizens in these sanctuary cities. For instance, in a sanctuary city congressional district that contains 50% illegal aliens, the number of actual voters is halved, and the power of their votes is doubled relative to a district that contains only citizens. Think about it. If your district is 50% illegal aliens, those citizens that are allowed to vote have twice as much power as those congressional districts like those in my state that don't have these illegal aliens counted. Only citizens should be counted in determining the power of citizens' votes. If this perverse incentive and dilution of Americans' votes is allowed to continue, the surge in illegal immigration under President Biden will also continue. And it will continue because they want to increase power in sanctuary states. This destroys the one person, one vote principle. All of this is to backfill congressional districts, just like the one in Brooklyn, New York, that Congresswoman Clark was calling for. That's why I'm offering my amendment, Hagerty number 1634, to preserve the one person, one vote principle, and to ensure that only citizens are counted in determining the power of citizens' votes. If Democrats allowed to vote on it, we could have resolved this whole process already. Yet we're still here. The question is pretty simple. Are Democrats willing to vote on my amendment to stop illegal aliens from being counted in determining congressional seats and electoral votes? Or are they so desperate to preserve this political power grab that they can't possibly risk the chance of losing it and bringing my amendment to a vote? There's no question where the blame should lie for any delay or government shutdown that might occur from this. I'm not asking my Democrat colleagues to vote for this. I'm simply asking that they vote on it. Although I hope they would consider the implications of putting illegal immigrants over their interest over the interest of the citizens of this country. For an issue this important to the American people, our citizens deserve to know where their representatives stand. I thought I might take our audience back in time, back to when this began, back to when President Joe Biden took office in January of 2021. When Joe Biden came into office, he immediately began to repeal the successful policies that President Trump had instated to ensure security at our southern border. He did this in an effort to precipitate the border crisis that we currently are experiencing. I warned back in January of 2021, and I'm going to read a direct quote here, that these proposals inspire lawlessness, they enable the flow of illegal drugs and human trafficking, and they will threaten Tennessee communities that are already hurting due to the ongoing pandemic. My warning back in January of 2021 has come true. Then, President Biden appointed Secretary Mayorkas to head up the Department of Homeland Security. I warned against appointing Secretary Mayorkas at the time. I explained to my colleagues that the DHS Inspector General found that Secretary Mayorkas intervened outside the normal protocol to push through visas when he worked in the department before, including securing a visa for an executive from Huawei, the communist Chinese technology firm that has so aggressively, in a predatory manner, tried to take over our own telecommunications and information systems. Can you imagine that? A person that was using their influence as a member of the federal government in the department to push for visas for executives from Huawei. That was Secretary Mayorkas. My warnings were ignored. Secretary Mayorkas was placed into office, and we have seen what's precipitated from that. In February of 2021, I warned against President Biden's repeal of the National Emergency Act at the southern border, the radical amnesty proposal that President Biden came up with, and his termination of the migrant protection protocols that had been so effective. I warned against all of these things because it would encourage more illegal immigration. And in doing so, it would reduce opportunity for American workers and place American citizens at greater risk of losing their children and loved ones to overdose at greater risk of crimes like we've seen perpetrated in New York and Georgia so recently. Just under 3 years ago, I visited Guatemala and Mexico to get to the heart of America's border security problems and to underscore the fact that this is urgent and it clearly needs to be dealt with. When I met with President Giammattei in Guatemala, he spent an hour and a half with me. He said, I can tell you what the quote-unquote root cause is of this immigration crisis. It's the messages coming out of the White House. He told me that we had precipitated a national security crisis in his own country of Guatemala because now caravans were moving through his country to get to ours. He said, I don't know who's coming into my country. The danger that that places Guatemalans under is a direct consequence of the actions that are being taken by your president in America. He told me this in the spring of 2021. He also said something else. He said the coyotes are smart. They take the messages, they extract those messages from your president, and they market them to the most vulnerable people in my country. They persuade them to take their life savings and generally their most promising child and entrust those life savings and that child to a criminal cartel that will then move that young person on an extraordinarily dangerous journey from Guatemala all the way up to the northern border of Mexico. I just got back from our southern border. It's a disaster like nothing I've ever seen. If you saw the risk that these young people were undertaking by following the cartels on this journey, they've given all their money to the cartels. Now these young people are entrapped and ensnared by them. They're placed in unbelievable conditions and unbelievable risk. What I saw down there would shock any of us in this room. This is the type of risk that we're creating. This was the complaint that the president of Guatemala made in no uncertain terms to me. When I talked to the foreign minister of Mexico on this same trip, he explained to me that we were destabilizing the economy of his country as well. No idea where these people are coming from that are flying into Mexico, that are getting there by boat or any other means of transit. But they have to deal with them as they march through his country. The cartels are becoming so strong that the Mexican government cannot contend with them. The cartels today are multi-billion-dollar criminal organizations that are working hand in hand with the communist Chinese. They're delivering poison into America every day. The precursor chemicals from fentanyl are coming in from China to Mexico. Chinese criminals are working hand in hand with the Mexican cartels. They've set up operations to poison young people in America. Now, the #1 cause of death for young people in America between the ages of 18 and 45 is drug overdose. You can thank our open borders, you can thank the cartels and the CCP, and you can thank President Biden for enabling all of this. I introduced the Migrant Resettlement Transparency Act. That would require the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Secretary of Homeland Security to consult in advance with state and local officials of those jurisdictions that would be impacted by the movement of these migrants regarding the federally administered program of migrant resettlement. Don't you think our communities should at least know who's coming, when they're coming, where they're going to come? Can their schools withstand it? Can the hospitals withstand it? Can our police forces and social services withstand it? These are very legitimate questions to bring forward. But we've had a dearth of information coming from the Biden administration. In fact, the first discovery of their movement of these migrants into towns and states away from the border was in my home state of Tennessee. They filmed them flying in after midnight to Chattanooga, Tennessee. These illegal migrants were brought off planes. They were deposited in Chattanooga and then bussed off to points unknown. Our communities need to know what sort of impact they can expect from all of this illegal activity. That information resides with the federal government within the executive branch of this administration. And administration is acting in such a lawless manner that they won't even tell us who's coming, what's coming, or when. This is destabilizing cities and towns and counties across America, and it's happening in my home state of Tennessee every day. You know, back in May of 2021, when he appeared before the Appropriations Committee, I asked Attorney General Merrick Garland if he would be willing to echo Vice President Kamala Harris's message that she'd given, do not come. Think about it, Attorney General Garland, our chief law enforcement officer in America. I'd heard Vice President Harris say this, do not come. Would he be willing to echo that sentiment, send that message to those who would illegally enter our country? He declined to do so. I think that should tell you all you need to know when America's chief law enforcement officer is unwilling to tell people to not enter our country illegally. In August of 2021, I asked my colleagues for support of my amendment to ensure that ICE has sufficient resources to detain and deport all illegal aliens who have been convicted of a criminal offense in the United States. Even though the Senate adopted it, Schumer and his Democrat colleagues stripped it out of the final bill. Again, the leader allowed his members to vote for it for political purposes. But at the end of the day, they stripped away ICE's ability and ICE's resources to actually deport people who have committed criminal acts here in America. Outrageous. In 2022, it was revealed that while the Biden DHS was not securing our border, they were actively working to censor Americans' speech. I introduced the Disclosed Government Censorship Act to require the administration to disclose its coordination with social media companies and its censorship activities. Well, I guess you can imagine what that met with here in the Congress. Again, an unwillingness to require our executive branch to disclose when it works with big tech companies to censor American speech. They want the ability to do this. They want the ability to police and censor Americans, yet they will not police our own southern border. In August of 2022, all 50 Senate Democrats voted against my amendment to direct the Judiciary Committee to ensure that ICE has sufficient resources to detain and deport just a greater number of criminal illegal aliens. Again, the response was no from every Democrat in this body. What are you saying when you vote no to providing the resources to ICE to deport criminal illegal aliens? You're saying that you're willing to support their criminal activity here in this country and that you're not going to send them back to their country of origin when they come here and do something like that. They've also objected to my bill, the Stop Fentanyl Border Crossings Act. And that objection has been made on multiple occasions because I brought it to the floor on multiple occasions every time I hear of another child dying in Tennessee and I talk with a parent or a grandparent that has learned from law enforcement or from healthcare providers that their son or grandson or daughter or granddaughter will not be coming home ever again because of being poisoned by fentanyl that's come illegally across our border. My bill would have allowed HHS to exercise its Title 42 authority to combat this fentanyl trafficking, to combat these overdoses. And let me put this into perspective. Just last week, I looked at data from 2021, and I can tell you the charts are moving in absolutely the wrong direction, ramping up year over year over year. The latest data that the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation shared with me was 2021. I took the annual number of overdoses and I divided that number by 365 to get to a daily count of drug overdoses in Tennessee of 86 drug overdoses a day in our state. 86 a day. That's just in 2021. It's probably up to 100 by now. It gets worse. When I looked at the number of deaths from drug overdose in my home state of Tennessee, that calculated to 11 kids per day dying in my state every day from drug overdose, from fentanyl poisoning in most cases. When you extrapolate that across the nation, we're talking about 300 kids a day dying here in America. Why are we tolerating this? Why is America tolerating this? Why would this body not pass my Stop Fentanyl Border Crossings Act? Why is the administration and my colleagues in this body, why are they willing to look the other way? It goes back to the amendment that I'm here to talk about today. It goes back to the very essence of power here in America and the way that power is distributed. When you think about it, the simplest answer is usually the right one. The simplest answer is usually the correct one. It's called Occam's razor. In this case, the simple answer is this. Illegal immigrants are counted for the purpose of allocating congressional districts and electoral votes in America. The more illegal immigrants that you have in your state, the more congressional votes you get, and the more electoral votes you get, and the more say your state and your citizens have when it comes to elections and legislation. Look at what's happening in states like California, Illinois, and New York. People are fleeing these states. I should say citizens are fleeing these states. They're moving to states like my own in Tennessee. They're moving to Florida. They're moving other places. They're leaving because of terrible policies. They're leaving because of rampant overspending. They are leaving these blue states en masse. Where are the sanctuary cities located? You won't be shocked to know that sanctuary cities are located in New York, in Illinois, in Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco. These sanctuary cities act as a giant magnet to attract the illegal migrants that have come across our border. These migrants have already broken the law once coming into our country. Where are they more likely than not to go? Would it be to those cities or states that have pledged not to enforce the immigration laws? I think you know the answer. That's the motive behind the crime that is taking place at our southern border. I've been working to prevent the Biden administration from giving plane tickets to migrants. You all have probably heard about this. Illegal migrants come to our border, they're given plane tickets to fly anywhere they want to in the United States. Let me explain how it happens. A Biden program called SSP, it provides through FEMA enormous sums of money to nonprofits that then in turn take those funds to transport illegal aliens into American communities. It's gotten much worse every year under President Biden. SSP and its precursor program received $800 million to do this back in fiscal 23. That's up from just $150 million the year before it. The recently rejected Senate border bill had an eye-popping $1.4 billion extra for this SSP program that is used to fly illegal immigrants to the cities of their choice in America. DHS's own website expressly confirms that these funds can be spent on plane tickets to the migrants' chosen destination. It says, quote, onward destination transportation is defined as transportation from a shelter and services provider to a non-citizen migrant's, that's a polite term, to a non-citizen migrant's final destination or point of contact. Now, it's limited that it said it can't exceed 10% of the total funding requested by the applicant, but that's a significant sum of money when you look at numbers like this, $800 million, $1.4 billion. These funds are going to fly illegal migrants around the country at your taxpayer expense. The Biden administration is also giving migrants cash assistance in multiple ways. More than $517 million in Biden ARP funds went to illegal aliens in the United States, including one-time cash grants. Think about that, Americans. We're handing out over $500 million in cash grants to people who come to our country illegally. I'm sure there are people in my home state that would like to get a cash grant. Not so for the taxpayer, not so for the American citizen. President Biden's also created massive new parole programs that are attracting hundreds of thousands of Haitian and Cuban migrants. And if you look at USCIS's own website, it announces that these migrants are eligible for cash and myriad other government benefits. Can you imagine this? Go check out the website of USCIS and see for yourself. Migrants from Cuba and from Haiti are encouraged to come here, and they're encouraged by telling them that they are eligible for cash grants. You know, I visited the southern border the other week. I spoke with the Border Patrol officials there. I spoke with local officials and sheriffs. I talked with ranchers there. You know, what the Border Patrol told me was actually quite shocking. It's probably going to be quite shocking to many Americans, that Border Patrol has encountered over 20,000 Chinese nationals coming across our southern border just in the past year. You think about that. That is an incredible number of people coming from China. The Chinese Communist Party knows who's leaving their country. They have an ironclad control over the citizens of their country. What are these people coming here for? Why are they here? Ask yourselves that. When I was in Texas, I went to a place called Shelby Park in Eagle Pass along the Del Rio sector. There, they've seen thousands of illegal immigrants come in. I think many of Americans have seen this. If you recall that embarrassing image for this administration under the bridge at Eagle Pass, that's Shelby Park. That section of a bridge that had thousands of migrants under it, that is Shelby Park. That is a place where control had been completely ceded to the cartels. That is Shelby Park. But Governor Greg Abbott of Texas has now stepped in. He's enforcing Texas law. He's subjecting people who set foot in Shelby Park to criminal trespass. Guess what's happened since Texas has taken that section of the border back? Illegal trespassing has stopped. What Governor Abbott has proven is that when you enforce the law, illegal immigration will stop. The Tennessee National Guard has now gone down to assist in another sector. Governors from across the country are stepping up and sending National Guardsmen there to demonstrate that if you can secure the border, even parts of the border, you can stop this illegal migration. But it's got to happen, it's got to take place across the entirety of the southern border. Think about squeezing a balloon. You can stop it at one place, but the migration just flows out to other points. But we can prove, and we have proved, and it is being proven, that enforcing the law will curtail illegal immigration. You know, perhaps the most striking thing that I learned 2 weeks ago when I was down at the border was from visiting a rancher there. And I've been to our border in California, I've been to it in Arizona, and I've been to it multiple times in Texas. But this last visit was absolutely shocking to me. Let me tell you the story of this rancher. He has 1,500 acres between the Rio Grande River and the Union Pacific rail line. That rail line is a target for what they call the gotaways. That rail line is what they use to hop on and ride into the interior of our country. The fencing along the border of his property has been absolutely destroyed by the cartels and the illegal migrants. He told me he's tried to fix the fence every night. He has it cut down again. He'll fix it, it'll be cut the next day. He cannot maintain the fence. He has stopped running cattle on his ranch. This is a rancher that is in the 5th generation of living and working out their livelihood on this ranch. His livelihood has been destroyed now because of what is happening on our southern border and because we have turned over control of our southern border to these drug cartels that are moving the gotaways through his property. He told me that he found 15 Syrians on his property the other day, 15 Syrian males. What were they doing there? Well, they didn't come and present themselves for asylum. They could have done that down at Eagle Pass. They could have done that someplace else. No, they were on his property as gotaways. They did not want to be caught. They didn't want the white glove treatment that I just described before, where you get a plane ticket, where you get cash. They're there for a different reason. This is deeply concerning. And many of you might have seen FBI Director Christopher Wray talk about this. The national security alerts here in the United States and across the world at levels he hasn't seen since 9/11. We should be deeply concerned about the national security crisis that is unfolding at our southern border. Just this past year, over 170 different nationalities have been apprehended at our southern border. Think about that. Over 170 different nationalities have been apprehended at our southern border. That doesn't include those that got away. Where are these people coming from? Why are they here? I'll tell you something else that was shocking that the rancher told me. It was getting to be about dusk. He said, look over in the horizon there. You're about to see some blinking blue lights. Sure enough, in a few minutes, the lights started going off. He said, that's your taxpayer dollars at work. Those are comfort stations. Comfort stations for those that have come across the border illegally. These are comfort stations for the gotaways. He said, here's what you'll find at the comfort station. First, and most important at the comfort station, is a charging bar for your cell phone. A cell phone charging bar is at the comfort station. I asked, why is that? Why do you need a cell phone charger there? And he said, because the people that come across illegally here use GPS pin drops that are provided to them by the cartels and their coyotes to help them find their way illegally into our country. That's the path, he said, for them to find rides that have been arranged over WeChat or some other overseas application that the cartels can use with impunity to direct their illegal trafficking of humans and, I presume, drugs into our country undetected. They're marching right across his property, and we are providing comfort stations for them to recharge their cell phones so they can continue their process of coming into our country illegally. Also, you'll find water and food at these comfort stations. That's our taxpayer dollars at work. This is the Biden administration encouraging illegal immigration at every level into our nation. And if you think about the people that are coming across that border that don't want to be caught, I can certainly tell you there's quite a contrast between what they're going through and what they're willing to go through versus the white glove treatment they would receive if they simply come to America and claim asylum. This is extraordinarily dangerous, my friends. Extraordinarily dangerous, and it's wrong. Speaking of being wrong, why should Americans have to live like this? The rancher told me that his wife heard something in the middle of the night. She said, I hear something out in the kitchen. He said he grabbed his pistol, he went into the kitchen. There were 20, and he said adult military-aged males in his kitchen, eating from his refrigerator and drinking everything in it. He told them to leave. I used a different term with me, but he told them to leave his home. Their response to him, he said, was, you're out of beer, go get me some more. He said he cocked his pistol. He said these invaders slowly backed out. They went to his barn. He said he thought for a minute about going to the barn, and then he realized he only had 6 bullets and there were 20 of them. He's been advised by law enforcement not to allow his 18 and 12-year-old children to go on the property unless they are armed or with someone who is. This is how we're treating Americans? This is how we're treating a farmer, a Texas farmer at our southern border? He and his family have to be subjected to this sort of treatment, this sort of violence, this sort of horror. Let me tell you what else he told me. He said one day, he pointed over to a bridge on his property near the railroad lines. He said there were two men there with their arms zip-tied behind their backs and bullets through their head. Evidently, a cartel deal gone wrong. This is organized crime taking place on his property in the United States, and we're doing nothing about it. He said one day his child found a woman whose leg had been severed because she tried to jump on that Union Pacific rail line and missed it, and the train ran over it. She crawled over to his property. She was up in the bed of their pickup truck. His child found this woman. They came in and life-flighted her out. He doesn't know whether she lived or not. But this is the carnage that is taking place at our southern border because we're creating these incentives to draw people in, to risk their very lives, and come here illegally. Americans should not have to live with this. American grandmothers and mothers shouldn't have to take those calls from the sheriff or the police chief saying that your son or daughter or your grandson or granddaughter are not coming home because they've touched or somehow encountered fentanyl that, again, has entered our country illegally across that border. This is a crisis proportions that we have never seen before. And I'll reiterate the national security crisis because it's getting worse by the day. The Biden administration is now using their CBP app to allow people to fly in directly to the United States from other countries. So it's not just at the border now, it's at our airports. We tried to get information about what airports are being used, where this is taking place. Again, the Biden administration will yield no information. It is extraordinary, it's dangerous, and it's placing American lives at risk every day. If you think about that, if you think about the kind of crisis that we're encountering every day, you've got to go back to the most fundamental of questions, and that is why. What is the incentive for putting Americans' lives at risk? What is the incentive for attracting young people from throughout Latin America and other places to undertake such a dangerous journey and to be entrapped by drug cartels and criminal organizations? What is the incentive to exposing our own children to the risk of death by fentanyl? What is the incentive to overwhelm our schools, to even kick kids out of the school that our Senate Majority Leader attended as a child so that illegal migrants can be moved into it? What is the incentive for overweighting our system and creating disaster across the cities in America? The incentive is simple. That incentive is power. Power is what this is all about, because power is what is delivered when illegal migrants are allowed to be counted for the purposes of allocating congressional districts and electoral votes. They're allowed to be counted for allocating power in the Congress and in the presidential elections. And they're allowed to be leveraged by citizens in these sanctuary cities to gain even more power than they deserve, taking away legislative power and electoral power from states like mine. Because these illegal migrants magnify the votes of those people in those districts. They're getting greater representation because they're allowed to count illegal migrants. Greater representation than they otherwise would desire. And again, look no further than the statements of Congresswoman Yvette Clarke in Brooklyn when she says the quiet part out loud, when she says she needs those illegal migrants for the purposes of redistricting. She needs those illegal migrants to maintain her district because people are fleeing New York. She doesn't want to lose her congressional seat. The simplest way to do that is to create a sanctuary city, a magnet, and bring those people in. To stick them into the high school there in Brooklyn and allow them to be counted for the purposes of allocating her congressional district and therefore adding another electoral vote to New York State. This is wrong. This is the incentive, and my bill would correct that. My bill would get right at this incentive, and it would stop this perverse incentive to bring people here illegally just for the purpose of being counted to expand power. That's what we need to do today. We need to step up and vote on this bill. We need to address this problem now. I think when Americans find out the shocking news that this means of counting electoral votes and congressional seats is being so abused that it's standing as the incentive to subject our nation to incredible pain and misery. And it's standing as an incentive to incite incredible misery for those people that undertake these journeys that they should not. I go back to what President Giammattei told me in Guatemala. He said, not only are you creating a national security risk with all the people that are moving through my country to get to yours, but he said, you're destabilizing families in my country. You're taking the most promising young people in my country and creating a brain drain right here. Because these families are handing their life savings over to these coyotes and these cartels. And they're sending their most promising child on this dangerous, dangerous journey. That shouldn't be happening. We should not be destabilizing other nations throughout Latin America. But that's precisely what is the result of this perverse incentive back here in America. That is precisely the result of the policies that have collapsed the protection of our southern border. And it's precisely the reason that you have people showing up at the southern border now with Vote Biden t-shirts on, wanting entry in America. Because they see this. They see this opportunity as a way to change their lives. What it is a way to endanger their lives. And it's also allowing these cartels to enrich themselves every day to a point that we can't contend with them. The Border Patrol tell me that they are outmanned and out-resourced at the southern border, that the cartels have better technology. They use drones. They use technology, again, as I described, to put GPS pinpoints along the way that they've mapped out to illegally enter our country. When I stopped by to visit with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation after I got back from the southern border 2 weeks ago, I explained to them what I saw, and then I asked them what they were saying. They told me that Venezuelan gangs are rampantly operating in our state. They told me about the sex trafficking that is going on. They told me about the so-called Detroit boys in Operation 313. That's the area code for Detroit, and this is their effort to try to get these criminal elements here in America who are partnering with the criminals in Mexico to spread drugs and human trafficking across America. They said that these Venezuelan gangs are moving young people in sex trafficking from Nashville to New York to Houston and back. These are young people that may never get out of their servitude to the Venezuelan cartels. They told me how violent they are. This criminal activity is happening in our soil. It's expanding because we're allowing it to happen. And their supply chains are moving, their supply lines are moving right across that southern border into America. So not only are they operating on the northern border of Mexico, but now they're freely operating here in our country. I'll take you back to the remarks of our FBI Director, Christopher Wray, who recently said the threat level that he's seen here in America is greater than since 9/11. We need to be deeply, deeply concerned about what is happening, what has been happening, and frankly, what may yet come from this national security crisis that we're creating. The dangers are very, very real, and the opportunity is before us today to address these dangers by stopping this perverse incentive. I hope we'll undertake that opportunity. I hope we'll have the opportunity to vote on this today and bring it to an end. I can assure you we should have voted on this already. We should have voted on it a long time ago. But delay after delay after delay is being undertaken because evidently our leader doesn't want to vote on it. Again, I'm not asking my colleagues to vote with me, but I'm asking my colleagues for the opportunity to vote on this. And I appreciate all of you that are here today to listen to the story about what's happening to America and to allow me to peel back to the very core of the incentive that is causing all of this. Let's address this. Let's stop this illegal trafficking. Let's stop the drugs coming into our country. Let's stop the crisis at our southern border. Let's allow our Texas ranchers and Arizona ranchers and California ranchers to get back to business. Let's bring safety back to our cities again. Mr. President, I reserve the remainder of my time.